This is a conversation that I've had to sit through in my head for the last 8+ years that I've been covering Tony Khan across the NFL and then into AEW. And am so grateful that as we head into the holiday season, I'm finally able to have a chance to have it with him, speaking with AEW founder, general manager, and wearer of many hats, Mr. Tony Khan. First off, Tony, congratulations on a big haul at the Takedown on SI Awards this year. AEW pretty dominant across many, many categories. We know that AEW, that's the place where the best wrestle, right? You have great matches, you have top performers year in and year out. So what made 2025 different from 2024 for you?
Well, it's a great question. I think that AEW in 2025 has been focused. I think we had a great goal at the beginning of the year after doing years of wrestling and continuing right now to do years of wrestling for a long time to come on TBS on Wednesdays and the weekends on TNT. We added something new to Dynamite and Collision this year with HBO Max becoming the streaming partner and the simulcast of these shows. It created an energy around the company and a goal for all of us to do something new and exciting that we had never done. And throughout this year, there's just been this sentiment, I think, in AEW and around AEW that this is a great year. AEW is having a tremendous year with great wrestling, a lot of excitement. As we talk more throughout this conversation about some of the awards that AEW accumulated, I'm very thankful for those. And that happened just this past week where Sports Illustrated announced the winners of the SI Wrestling Awards, and AEW took home 10 awards. I'm very excited to talk about the 10 awards and also pay a lot of compliments to a lot of people in AEW, but I'm very grateful to you, Jon, and all the people who work at SI who voted AEW the winners. Thank you for giving us that consideration. It feels like this year throughout 2025, there's just been a great energy with AEW and our fans, and the fans have really responded positively to so many of AEW's pay-per-views and a lot of our TV shows. I think we've been putting on great pay-per-views, really year after year, month after month for a long time. And this year, I think the TV week to week is also the strongest it's been possibly ever. Certainly in the time that we've been doing 4 hours of weekly TV with Dynamite and Collision the past few years, I think this is the best. So I'm really having a lot of fun with it. I enjoy the shows, and I'm having more fun with the shows than many, many years. Maybe since when all the shows were in Jacksonville by my house, that was pretty fun too. But everybody seemed to have a good time there in Jacksonville, and we've been able to bring that kind of energy both backstage and in the ring, where everybody's having fun in AEW and the rivalries take center stage and the fans are just enjoying the shows. Feels like that's been a lot of what 2025 has been about.
So it was interesting because our process for the awards, it was a 9-person panel, and there were no list of nominations. It was just open-ended. It was come up with a top 5 of each of these individual categories. So you're going to get a lot of different input on different walks of life when it comes to pro wrestling preference. I feel like the staff covers a lot of ground in that sense. And I think the term that you used was very interesting, was focus, because the one thing that the focus of our voting kept coming around towards was this centralized Hangman Page arc. And I think that was a pretty big driver for a lot of the success that AEW had, not just in those awards, but in 2025 in general. Where does that focus come from? Because if you're saying we had focus now, that insinuates that maybe that same focus either wasn't there or wasn't present in the same way than it was this year.
Well, you get ideas and you have plans, and I think I changed my approach. When I talk about focus, I've been pretty transparent about this, that, 5 years ago, now it would be almost 6 years ago, actually, that I really wanted, after the first few months of AEW TV, to tighten things up. And it was 2020, January 1st, 2020, we came in, we had this great show in Jacksonville, and it set us on the path to the original AEW Revolution pay-per-view. And that TV leading up to Revolution, from that show January 1st in Jacksonville to the end of February in Kansas City and all those shows in between, Austin, Atlanta, there's just so many great events in there. And I thought that was a great time for the company. And certainly I felt like I had a good process. And I look back on it in 2024, and it was a year ago this week, Christmas time of 2024. The Continental Classic was going so great. I had really enjoyed putting it together, and I had kind of had a less collaborative process in that than I had the year before, or really in anything I'd been doing. I just sat down and did it all right here at home in Chicago, in this place. And I felt really strong about it. And I also thought back, I had made a goal for myself that AEW, and by the way, I really am looking forward to talking about the award winners and the individuals here, and not about me. But since you asked about the focus and some of the stories and putting the TV shows together, yeah, I definitely felt like I had had a good approach that I'd refined in 2020, and trying to be good, trying to do, listen and be collaborative. I think I'd gotten too collaborative, and it was kind of the same mistake I made at the beginning. And it really helped in the end of 2024 going into 2025. I just said, okay, I'm going to put the outline for everything together myself. I'm going to eliminate the meetings between shows, and I will put everything together myself between shows, and then I'll come in with the outline of what I want, rather than have a lot of collaborative meetings where everybody chimes in what they think we should be doing. And I thought that helped us at the beginning, and I think it probably helped us this year, having that focus where I'm focused and not having 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 people in a meeting contributing great ideas.
Interesting. So you're hearing a lot of noise. I don't say noise in a derogatory term.
Noise. They're all good ideas
right,
in their own.
Right.
In their own, and I still like to hear ideas, but instead of doing it as I put the outline together, I would rather do it looking ahead to next week and take some ideas as I put the next outline together. But putting the outline to the show together, I'm never going to let it be a collab. Putting the outline of the show together, I have a good process for it, and I'm back to the process that I used in 2020 and 2021.
That's all really fascinating, because it does apply to these individual award winners, because you see that process seeped in through that collaboration between the performer and the booker, right? So let's take this Hangman example. It wins our rivalry of the year, and it wins our storyline of the year. Hangman having this redemption story, which, it's a process that on television looks like it kind of started around the beginning of the year, on the back of the Christopher Daniels stuff, and then culminates obviously with the big moment at All In. Now, as far as the Death Riders are concerned, Tony, I know you're online, you see stuff from what people have to say. Revolution comes around, it's a great show, and then the main event's very divisive with how everything ended with Copeland and the Death Riders. And as a consumer, and this is me opining, but also based on a lot of feedback from other people who cover this and fans as well, there was a big shift in the focus of that story after that centered much more on Hangman's redemption and shifting how the Death Riders were positioned in that sense.
Not right away. Not like that night.
Not overnight. Not overnight by any stretch of the imagination.
Because to your point, you're making really good points, but I think it's, important to look at the year. And if we're going to talk about 2025, which I think is great for us to do, and talk about some of these strong points, I think it's good to look at the totality of the year. And you made a very, very intelligent point, I think, that a lot of this came about at the Maximum Carnage with the Hangman versus Christopher Daniels match. That was something that made a lot of sense, and that Christopher Daniels felt he was at the end of his in-ring run and wanted to have this final great match, and he wanted it to be with Hangman. And I know Hangman felt like this would be a great outlet for him to show some violence and show his violent tendencies, but also maybe to get in touch with what he's capable of, and also to understand what he had done when he put Christopher Daniels on the shelf. when I talked to both of them, I thought it would be great if this was a Texas death match, because it would allow them to do all these things that would put Christopher Daniels into retirement. It would be a very memorable match on the path to retirement, and it would reestablish Hangman Page as the king of the Texas death match. And in doing so, the violence that he's capable of could be unleashed in this type of match, and it would really set the stage, to your point, for a lot of things to come. But it was still a long way away before Hangman would be associated with the Death Riders. And coming out of Revolution, following up on these things, we saw the return of Swerve Strickland.
Right.
And that certainly has a lot to do with Hangman Page. And these things started to set the stage for what would become the big events of the summer. And Swerve Strickland obviously has that complicated past with Hangman Page.
Sure.
Also has a deep friendship going back with Will Ospreay that we've established in AEW. And now you have all three of these great heroes and the Death Riders, these really insurmountable villains that Jon Moxley did such an incredible job of portraying and launching into life. And I believed in the Death Riders the entire time. I never wavered. I always believed that this would really be great for AEW, and it has been great for AEW. And it was like Novocaine. It took some time to set in, and when it did, everybody realized how great it was. And I think the Death Riders and Hangman Page, there's still some time before all that came together, and it led to the path of the Owen Hart tournament and having multiple heroes vying to be the one to take down Mox and get the belt out of the briefcase and stop the Death Riders.
So all that you're laying out right there, there's a lot of layers to that, right? There's a lot of different paths that a story can take. There's a lot of different characters that have to develop over the course of that story. So are you cognizantly laying those breadcrumbs that far in advance in Maximum Carnage in January? Do you have that vision? And I'm asking these questions because I really want to get into your psyche here, because I think this all correlates with how these characters and these performers are ultimately presented here.
Yes, but so many of the ideas come from me brainstorming with the wrestlers. And I think in a lot of the best times of AEW, that's what will come and will happen. Will be, I'll come in with some ideas and the wrestlers will come in with ideas, and we'll brainstorm and try to find the best path. You know, as we talk about these great heroes, and you asked about the things to come, and I mentioned, you know, there's certainly a lot of time in between that Hangman Page, Christopher Daniels match at Maximum Carnage in Cincinnati that would be the retirement of Christopher Daniels. And then, of course, it was about 6 months later, from the middle of January to the middle of July, about 6 months from that Maximum Carnage match to All In Texas. A lot happened in between. And another huge element to this, because it would be a team effort, a lot of people involved in taking down the Death Riders, and these people have gone on their own different journeys, and it leads us back to the end of the year, and we're approaching AEW World's End, very appropriately to end 2025. Another huge element of the Death Riders and banding together to stop the Death Riders is the Ops. And it was at Spring Breakthrough where Samoa Joe and, of course, Katsuyori Shibata and the substitute partner who had, now we're talking about Maximum Carnage, somebody that put it on the line and had a great match at Maximum Carnage, somebody who had earned a world title opportunity and had a lot to say about this Death Rider situation, Powerhouse Hobbs. And that was not originally set. Hook got injured, and this is a great example of how things happen in real life in wrestling, and this is a real injury, and it came about at the hands of the Death Riders, and it made perfect sense for Powerhouse Hobbs to be the person to step up with the Ops, and it changed things for many reasons. Then you had the Ops fighting against the Death Riders, and as you had these heroes, Hangman Page and Will Ospreay, who both went to the finals and met each other at Double or Nothing, which you voted as the show of the year. And I think a huge part of it was to have really multiple elements of this coming together. Mentioned the Ops and the Death Riders. Well, we had this incredible Anarchy in the Arena match, and that was an amazing part of Double or Nothing, but also to have Ospreay versus Hangman.
Yes.
To see who would be going on to challenge Jon Moxley. Hangman Page was the winner. Will Ospreay had promised him, I will have your back. And with the way Swerve had been in contention, he had come back chasing Mox. He had been stopped by the Young Bucks. It was at AEW Dynasty, Mox versus Swerve. Again, a very popular challenger to Mox and the Death Riders. The return of the Young Bucks, who had not been seen at all in 2025 until Dynasty in AEW, made their return in a massive way, helping Mox retain the title. It led us down a path, and I mentioned through Double or Nothing, to have the Young Bucks and the Death Riders fighting some of the top heroes in AEW together in this incredible Anarchy in the Arena match, and have Ospreay versus Hangman for the winner to go on to All In Texas. Hangman won the match, continued down this incredible path that he's been on. He's so important to AEW. And you had Will Ospreay and Swerve looking for retribution against the Young Bucks who cost him at Dynasty. Will Ospreay, the perfect partner, and Will Ospreay and Swerve went on to have this incredible match at AEW All In Texas on the same day that Hangman Page fought Jon Moxley, and to have Ops versus Death Riders to start the show.
Right. So you have all these different characters now evolving from that one seed that was laid much earlier in the year, and they've all branched off into their respective paths as a result of that.
It continues to this day. We're at World's End now, and look at where everyone is. These are all still people very involved in the show that have taken a path over the past 6 months. We talked about the first 6 months of the year, and then kind of that huge point in the middle of the year at AEW All In Texas. And then people have taken another journey since then. Hangman Page held the world championship and riding high, defending the title against top contenders. Some of the biggest names in AEW went on to wrestle Hangman, and he had these incredible matches, beating top challengers, beating MJF at Forbidden Door, beating Kyle Fletcher in the main event of All Out, an incredible 38-minute match, and beating Samoa Joe at Wrestle Dream, leading to Samoa Joe taking a dark turn and the Ops taking a dark path that they're on now, which led to Full Gear. Hook, of course, we learned, has always been with the Ops. He never left. And we never saw that real clean endpoint for Hook, and now we know why. Samoa Joe had a plan to get the world championship away from the Death Riders, and now we see maybe Samoa Joe had more nefarious plans all along in the background, and maybe the Death Riders weren't the only bad people in AEW after all. And speaking of that, we've seen the Young Bucks, Matt and Nick. If anybody could think, should say Matt and Nick are bad people, it should probably be me. I'm lucky.
You are lucky. How's your neck feeling? You all right?
I'm very fortunate. I think about it every day. Sometimes it stings, but especially in the wintertime. But I'm lucky to be here.
No, but you're right. But I want to take all that and bring it together here, because you're always very thorough when you are able to go back and hit these story beats and these points when talking about them. But the common complaint or criticism, whatever you want to say, that you see from fans, sometimes veterans, is, the 5-star matches aren't how you tell stories, right? So everyone has their own opinion on that. And I want to know, because you just went through all these different story beats that were developed off of one match that was laid the groundwork for in January. How do you think stories are best told in wrestling?
Well, to your point, first of all, I thought Maximum Carnage set a few things in motion. When Mox beat Hobbs, and that was on Dynamite, then you had Hangman versus Christopher Daniels on the other leg of Maximum Carnage on Collision, put all these people down a different path. And there were multiple stops along the way. Another really important thing, I think, for Hangman, that after the Christopher Daniels match, we saw Hangman make a return to being a fan favorite. And I'll be honest, it was something I came up with in January, and it was a change I made to original plans. I felt like Hangman versus MJF would be a huge program for AEW going into Revolution. I had to make some changes this year Jay White was a huge part of
Mhm.
AEW. Jay White was injured. And looking at the landscape, of course, Hangman is in a top position. He's doing incredibly well. I felt like after Hangman had the match with Christopher Daniels and realized the dark path he was going down and realized that it didn't have to be like this, we started to see a more of a fan favorite Hangman Page after that, on a path to becoming officially a fan favorite again. And I thought MJF would be the perfect opponent for him. So I thought of this segment where we would load a local talent uh, and have a local talent out there as if they were going to do a match. And then MJF in January is going to come out there and kick this kid out of the ring. Who are you? You're a loser. You're some bum. Nobody's ever heard of you. No name. Get out of here. Get the hell out of here. I'm going to talk. MJF's doing a promo. And then you hear the music of Hangman Page. And then you start to put together those things and you realize the Chekhov's gun that I planted there at ringside. And that enhancement wrestler was there for Hangman. That's why that guy was out there.
Mm-hmm.
And Hangman told MJF, get out of the ring. And that started everything between them. That was the beginning of it. It was that simple.
Okay, so again, we're talking story beats here. So when people say you can have as many great matches as you want, that's not long-form storytelling in wrestling. What's your retort to that? Like, how do you think stories are best told? And this is something that comes from movies and music and books. Like, everyone has their own approach to storytelling. So I'd really love to know what your philosophy is when it comes to that.
I think it's best for AEW to tell stories and put on wrestling matches with a focus that is best described as authentic to AEW.
What does that mean?
I think we found a really great presentation in when we launched into 2020, 2021. There's great stories that people could talk about at length if they're AEW fans and want to point out, oh, there were a lot of stories in the early AEW. Hangman and Kenny is a great example of that. And looking at what happened in the early days of AEW, well, if you want to look back at some of these early shows and see how great the wrestling was, see how great the TV was, and there's lots of wrestling out there. There's lots of movies and TV, but in the world of wrestling, there are some accepted practices of how to put on a wrestling TV show. And I thought we carved out a really great path for ourselves. And this year I've been trying to make sure that the presentation is authentic to AEW, not trying to be like any other wrestling company. We can take the best wrestling we have and focus on the characters, the wrestlers in AEW, their presentation, their relationships between each other, but with the focus on the wrestling. And you don't have to sacrifice the wrestling to tell great stories. And we've shown that in 2025. I think we've had more great wrestling matches across the TV and pay-per-views and told more interesting stories. And, we've been sitting here and I know we'll have I don't have a hard out here. I'm going to stay. It's like Christmas week. I'm spending this time with you, John.
I'm appreciative. I'm very appreciative of that.
And it's nice. And, there's a lot of great wrestling and rivalries and stories that are happening in AEW. And it's been mostly the men we've been talking about so far. And, this happening on both sides, the women's wrestling.
Oh,
also.
absolutely. And we're going to get into that for sure.
And multiple award winners that you all picked from AEW with the women in AEW. So the men and the women are doing a great job. Hangman himself was the recipient individually or as part of a rivalry, multiple awards, including Hangman versus Mox. I would be remiss if I didn't at least spend a bit of time talking about how amazing Mox is to AEW.
Let me tell you, Mox had a great year. And I think that, and not to interrupt, I apologize, but I think that Mox, one of his true secret sauces is that you don't always recognize the quality of his work and how much he's enhancing everyone around him. Because I think it showed big.
There's another thing too. It's like John was pretty hurt at the start of the year.
Yeah.
And people were like, well, he was banged up and he worked his way back in without ever taking time off. He's been here all year and he actually got healthier wrestling every week. The man's a marvel. He's the last 200 match a year, touring champion before he came to AEW. I don't think anybody's done the 200 dates on the road like that since. It's really a throwback. And then now in this era where so much of the focus in pro wrestling is on TV and not, touring 6-7 days a week anymore, that's really something that I think people don't understand.
Yeah.
Is Jon's wrestling was awesome all year. He put out his very best all year. At the beginning of the year, he was pretty banged up and actually came back and got healthier through the year while he was still wrestling and never taking time off. Jon Moxley, we owe him so much. I'm so grateful for Jon Moxley. And he shared in that rivalry award with Hangman Page. And I can talk at length about Hangman Page and Jon Moxley, how valuable they both are to AEW. And Jon Moxley being the villain, sometimes the villain doesn't get the love and the accolades that a fan favorite might. And Hangman deserves all these accolades. He deserves all 3 of those awards. And I just wanted to mention, since the rivalry award is shared between Hangman and Mox deserves so much praise and is such a huge part of AEW and why the company has been so strong for years. And I think Jon has been at his very best. And I think it's helped all of us be at our very best every week, week in, week out. He's at every Dynamite and every Collision. The only person that came to every show besides me this year was Mox.
Wow.
And he is incredible.
You mentioned there was a pivot with Hangman at the beginning of the year where you said, no, you know what, we can ride with him, and that babyface redemption story, which ended up winning this award.
Wasn't as much a pivot with him. I knew I was going to take Hangman after the Daniels match to be a fan favorite, but I felt like the perfect villain for him going into Revolution would be MJ.
Was Max. So that's still relevant to what I want to ask, though, because when do you get that instinct to make a big move in a story? Like, are you listening to what the fans say? Is it something that you inherently just feel? I'd always wonder how someone who's got the pen comes up with that, or when they just know that it's time to
totally depends.
Take something different.
It could be Friday morning. It could be Tuesday night. It could be in the middle of the night. It could be in the shower. It could be sitting here on this couch.
Mm-hmm.
I think in that case of that one, I think I was sitting on this couch and about 11 months ago, or in January, and that's how I recall it.
Yeah.
But I just felt like the right thing to do, and that's why we do so much of this in pencil.
Yeah. No,
so whatever I had thought about doing in February, March, I changed it, and I thought that Hangman versus Max would be a huge part of Revolution, and what a great show that Revolution was. And it did so many great things for us.
Sure.
And it was great. I can't wait to go back to Los Angeles, another one of my hometowns, and put on another awesome Revolution this year. And ironically, it was 5 years from the original Revolution,
right,
in 2020.
Right.
And 5 years later, I really was trying to take that same mindset very deliberately of, okay, I took a different approach to get to Revolution 2020 than I had to Full Gear 2019. And just like that, I would say, okay, well, I want to take a different approach to get to Revolution 2025 maybe than I had to get to Full Gear 2024.
So talking about Revolution, one of the biggest parts of Revolution was Toni Storm, right? She was a massive part of that show. The Hollywood ending feud capping everything with Mariah May. And
I thought of the name, the Hollywood ending, on a park bench in Australia sitting with Toni Storm. I was in Australia and she was about to do the second match, and you asked me where these things come from.
No, it's interesting. I appreciate that.
We were on a park bench talking, we were having lunch, and I was like, the Hollywood ending.
There you go, the Hollywood ending. So that was a huge match for 2025. And honestly, Tony, I really do believe that women's wrestling was instrumental to the industry in 2025. Not just you guys, WWE had a great year of women's wrestling. You saw Stardom have a great year. It was a big backbone for 2025. How Mercedes wins in the SI Awards, Tony wins in the SI Awards. How instrumental did you feel the women were to the success of AEW and the industry this year as a whole?
Absolutely incredible. absolutely incredible. And there are multiple great women I want to talk about, but the two that captured awards where we can begin are, of course, the current TBS champion, Mercedes Moné, who was voted the best in-ring female wrestler in the world by your group at Sports Illustrated, and timeless Toni Storm, who was voted the best wrestler on the mic, period, in the world in 2025. And I agree with those awards. I think that the two of them are great rivals and great competitors. And their match at AEW All in Texas is one of my very favorite matches we've ever had. I'm so proud of both of them. They've both taken very different paths to get here. And they both had great careers before they came to AEW. And now they've done that much more here in AEW as rivals. And I look forward to a lot of great women's wrestling in AEW. We have so many great stars. I cannot wait. And I'd love to talk about this, even though they weren't the ones who took the awards home this year. Next year, you never know. Two of the front runners could be the people wrestling for the Women's World Championship this weekend at AEW World's End. Of course, the former champion, Jamie Hayter, and the current champion, Chris Statlander. They're two of the greatest stars in AEW. They've been with us since our first year, both of them, and they both took very different paths to get to this point, but they both changed and evolved so much. And it's great juxtaposition to talk about these two wrestlers that have been in AEW and with us now for 6 years and comparing them to these huge free agents that came in. And Mercedes and Toni have totally different paths arriving here as free agents and being part of AEW. But they're both people that have joined us along the way and have excelled. And then you have Chris and Jamie, people that have been here from the very beginning and have excelled.
Yeah.
So I think for a lot of great women. And now the Babes of Wrath, they're great tag team champions. Speaking of Mercedes, she'll be teaming with the Ring of Honor Women's World Champion, Athena, one of our great stars here, who has now dominated ROH and also is a great presence in AEW and one of the top champions in the world. So you'll have 4 great champions in that tag title match this Saturday at World's End.
Well, I was going to say, even in our breakout star of the year category, Harley Cameron picked up some votes. Megan Bayne picked up some votes. Women were well represented in wrestling this year. And I really do believe that they were instrumental to getting the industry through some creative lulls this year across the board. You just spoke very highly of Toni Storm and Mercedes in particular. I know how highly you think of both of them. I always see in the discourse, if AEW is willing to feature these women so prominently, why have they not main evented a pay-per-view yet? Is 2026 the year that we finally see 2 women or maybe more women headline an AEW pay-per-view?
It's a great question. It's very potentially possible. It has to be the right match in the right situation at the right time. If there were ever 2 that could do it, it would be the 2 you mentioned, but there's a bunch of other candidates for it as well. And it was a fantastic match they had at All In Texas. That was a main event caliber match, and it really felt that way. And it was presented as one of the main matches on the card. You know, there were 3 key matches distributed down, and there were multiple other matches that I think could have easily been main event matches on the card, but there were 6 spaces that we put up on Globe Life Field, 3 matches, and Toni Storm, Mercedes, Omega, Okada, and Hangman and Mox.
Loaded show. Totally loaded show.
Any one of those could have been a great main event. I mean, Okada and Omega also could be a great main event on any show. It goes without saying, I think. And Mercedes,
why can't, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but why can't it be, and this is just more of a philosophical thing, you said it has to be the right match, it has to be the right story. Why can't insert champion Chris Statlander versus Toni Storm be a main event in the same way that Hangman Page versus Kyle Fletcher can be a main event? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it just depends on the situation and the rivalry at the right time. I think it's a great point and a great question. And you know, for what the matches are, and in that case, I thought for what they were going to do, going 38 minutes, tearing the house down on that particular night, I thought Hangman and Kyle was a great choice. And knowing what they had planned, and a lot of times that comes down to it. I think it's absolutely something we can see, and I would expect to see in the future on the night where it makes the most sense, and it's the biggest and most anticipated match on that card.
Yeah, just because I feel like women really shined in 2025 and across all the companies. WWE was very much benefited by the quality of women's performers, and I thought AEW had a lot of the same as well. So I'm glad to see that you share the sentiment in the quality of them. And Mercedes had a hell of a year, to your point, and what she's doing right now across wrestling. Is it strange to hear when all these fans, because there's a lot of them, when they say, the creative control, or she's burying all these other women. Meanwhile, when you win 13 belts or whatever the number is, you got to lose all 13 eventually too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, hypothetically, unless you retire as champion.
Unless you go another 20 years as champ, sure.
Yeah. And I agree with that. But it's, absolutely, Mercedes is tremendous to work with. And I had been adamant about building Mercedes up and having Mercedes continue to win and win and win. And then finally, you have this match that was, to your point, such a huge, huge match. And I felt like could have main evented many, many shows and was presented as a main event match on All In Texas as part of the biggest show we've ever had in North America, with Mercedes versus Toni Storm, the TBS champion versus the world champion for the world title. And I felt like that was the perfect time for Mercedes to have her undefeated run end, was at All In Texas, when it felt like she was going to win, like she was inevitable. She never loses. And timeless Toni Storm picked up that great win. They have this incredible chemistry that has carried over. It continues to exist, and I would expect to see them again involved down the line, because they're two of our greatest stars, and they have incredible chemistry, and there's so much meat on that bone.
Sure. On the point of Kyle Fletcher winning Breakout Star of the Year, and you just talked about Kyle Fletcher and Hangman before. Yeah, I've always been really impressed by how Kyle carries himself. He's still young, but he carries himself as someone who's been there before and knows how to handle it. And 2026 was a huge year for him, where I think it's 2025, I should say, and 2026 will probably be an even bigger year for him. It's very easy to see Kyle Fletcher being the AEW World Champion in the not so distant future. When you have injuries like what you had to the roster across this year, with the likes of Will Ospreay, Kenny Omega was gone for a period of time, Swerve's gone, how do you know that someone is ready for that moment to be elevated?
It's a great question. I think it has to feel like the timing with the crowd, and the timing with the fans, and the timing with that person and where they are in their career. It's many factors. It's not one set of rules or one rule of thumb that applies to every person or every wrestling company. So it's just a feel, and it's timing. And there are so many great wrestlers that contribute in AEW. And I truly believe it's not just the end all be all to be a world champion. I think it's a great accolade, and it is a huge part of a wrestler's career. But there are many people who have had great careers without being the world champion. I think Kyle Fletcher would be a great world champion and is somebody who absolutely has that potential. But I also don't think it has to be that every person in wrestling, you say, has to win the world title and it is their end game. I think Kyle Fletcher is a perfect example of somebody who actually has a very good chance to win the world title and possibly will be a world champion. There are many great wrestlers who went through their career. Roddy Piper, probably the greatest example of this, where it hasn't diminished his career at all in any way that Roddy Piper was not the world champion, because he was always a fixture in professional wrestling. He had an incredible career and accomplished things all over the world. And it's not like there's one person in the world that would care more about Roddy Piper or would change their opinion if he had been the world champion. I think everybody who's ever followed the sport and studied the history of it or watched it in the 80s, 90s, or since is well aware of Roddy Piper.
That's interesting that you bring that point up, because in 2025, you introduced a lot of titles and you changed and modified some titles. You brought the women's tag titles in. We just had the national situation. And I would love to know, what is your mentality when it comes to deciding a degree of importance with championships and where they stand on the card? Because I know in the past you've said that you envision a world where the TNT championship can mean just as much as the world championship to some people and whatnot. So I'd love to know, what is your psyche with that?
Well, I think we have great wrestlers and great champions, and they all bring different things to the table. We have multiple shows now with AEW on Dynamite Wednesday nights on TBS, and with Collision, which is typically on Saturdays on TNT. But this week we've got a Christmas Collision Thursday on Christmas night, and a pay-per-view this Saturday with AEW World's End. So it's a little bit different of a cadence. But what I was thinking is, I think it's really important for us to have, in the case of AEW being where the best wrestle, great champions and championship fights that we can put on, and not necessarily have every champion need to wrestle and defend the title every single show, but have exciting line of challengers and have exciting high stakes fights on our shows. And we also partner with multiple promotions around the world. And I know there's a lot of demand for AEW championships and bringing in AEW champions and championship fights. And when the AEW wrestlers travel, we don't have as many AEW championship matches outside of AEW as other promotions have in the past. So I thought, it's an interesting thing. And I like the AEW titles being defended in AEW, but also there's the potential to have championship fights with our partner promotions, whether the belts are being defended in New Japan Pro Wrestling or CMLL, or even going to Rev Pro in UK and collaborating with these companies, in particular at the Tokyo Dome, Arena Mexico. These are great homes to pro wrestling, and we could see AEW's champions going there potentially and defending their titles there, in addition to the 4 hours we currently have of AEW programming. And I'm really proud of what we have, and it's always potential that we could get more programming because we're doing very well, very popular. So I think having a great roster of wrestlers and great championships to be defended across the shows is important. And every single person who holds a championship in AEW or ROH, I'm really proud of them. In AEW, obviously, it means a lot of exposure. AEW is on in 150 countries around the world. And all the women and men who hold championships in AEW today, I'm incredibly, incredibly proud of their work. And they are incredibly powerful and tremendous representatives of AEW.
But I guess, putting on the philosophical hat for a second, a belt can only mean as much as the equity that it carries, right? Like, that's why someone wants to be the world champion, because being the world champion comes with equity. It comes with prestige. Being the TNT champion those first few years of AEW, that was like a huge thing for a lot of wrestlers because of the equity that it immediately had out of the gate. And when you have a lot of belts, I would have to imagine it can be challenging to establish the proper equity for each of them. So how do you navigate that and determine what each one's value is within the realms of the stories that you're telling?
That's a great question. I think that everybody who has a championship in AEW right now is somebody that I really want to focus and have on the shows. And now with 4 hours of TV and working with other promotions, there's more opportunities than there were in the beginning of AEW to feature champions and stories. When we launched, we only had 2 hours, and we established the TNT title, and we really only had 2 hours of Dynamite with these champions, with the world champion, the women's world champion, the TNT title, and the tag title. Now I've expanded in the women's division since the first couple of years. We've added the TBS championship and the women's world tag team championship, and added more championships for women and men, knowing that we expanded our programming. We went from 2 hours a week to 3 hours a week, and now we have 4 hours a week. And not only do we have 4 hours a week, but we have awesome shows that I'm really proud of. I think we put great wrestling on Dynamite and Collision every week, and having top wrestlers, every single person who holds a championship in AEW, I think is somebody that not only am I proud of as a champion, but people that wrestlers should hang their hat on chasing these people.
Okay.
Whether you want to chase Samoa Joe for the world title, or whether you want to chase Chris Statlander for the women's world championship, whether you want to chase Mercedes Moné for the TBS title, or chase Mark Briscoe for the TNT title. whether you want to be chasing FTR or the Babes of Wrath for the tag titles. These are all great wrestlers. And now with the Continental Classic, it's a little interesting because Kazuchika Okada captured the international title from Kenny Omega at All In Texas. And then he's been the Continental Champion now for well over a year. He of course, won the Continental Classic last year and went in as the defending champion. He beat Eddie Kingston right before Eddie Kingston got injured and was out for a long time. And then Okada defended the title all through 2024 and established himself as arguably the greatest tournament professional wrestler of all time, winning the Continental Classic last year. Okada has won the G1 Classic in Japan 4 times, and he's won the Continental Classic last year. And right now, he's in the thick of the Continental Classic as one of the top contenders in the Continental Classic, trying to keep that Continental title. He won the international title from Kenny. He had the Continental title to establish the intrigue of the match. And also, I made a belt, to be honest. I'm a big fan of Japanese wrestling. And when I was growing up, Steve Williams and Terry Gordy wrestled the Steiners, and they had the unified tag title. And it was 2 separate belts, but they called them the unified belts. And I like that. And in this case, I made a belt that represented what Kenny and Okada would each bring. And it even had side plates, with Okada doing the Rainmaker and Kenny doing the One Wing Angel, which are the side plates on that unified belt. But the unified belt, it was really intended to be, something I brought in and have established, with the unified title being the Continental Champion and the International Champion, 2 legs into one belt. And nobody has ever held 2 singles championships in AEW.
So then does that make that more valuable inherently than, say, the TNT Championship?
I mean, it's 2 championships. So it is 2 of the AEW championships. Nobody's ever done it before. So I think some of the value is in the eye of the beholder. But when you have a great champion like Okada, who's been a great Continental Champion, he won the 2024 Continental Classic, which was an excellent tournament.
Sure.
He won 2 matches in one night, beating Ricochet and Will Ospreay at World's End last year in these awesome matches. Ospreay and Fletcher was also an incredible match to kick off the show. And I loved last year's World's End, and I thought it was an amazing accomplishment by Okada to win the Continental Classic after winning 4 G1s. Now he's won 5 of those major tournaments, and the only other person who did that was Masahiro Chono with his 5 G1 wins. And now, going into World's End, we've got the Continental Classic last round of the league matches coming up. Christmas Eve and Christmas night will be the final matches before the semifinals, and it's all up for grabs right now. It's a really exciting situation. Okada won that international title from Kenny, and the Continental title's at stake here. Is he going to come out with both of those championships? We'll find out. It'll happen in the days to come. We'll find out if he can advance to the semifinals and if he can continue to reign as a unified champion. But to me, it's 2 belts that have great prestige, the Continental title and the international title. And now Okada is the first person ever to hold 2 belts at the same time. And he will be fighting to continue to do so in the days to come. And that is something that I thought was cool. And certainly coming out of the Continental Classic last year and then having Kenny Omega return to AEW.
It was huge. It was massive. It was massive
for us to have Kenny back.
But so you just said, and I'm sorry that I'm fixated on this, but I'm really enjoying hearing how you break it down, because you just said the Continental Classic the Continental Championship brings a lot of prestige in its own right. But why should, putting on the fan hat here, why should the fan care more about that than, say, if the Continental Classic led to becoming the number 1 contender, or maybe even becoming the AEW World Champion? Because in the hierarchy of the promotion, isn't that the ultimate prize?
Yes.
Right?
Sure. Yes, it is. But that could be the path. You know, a lot of the it wasn't like that was the prize the first year of the G1. It wasn't like that was the prize the first year of the And it wasn't like that was the prize the first 3-4 years of the Royal
So you
Rumble.
see that as something that could
And
evolve over
so
time?
it wasn't like that. It could potentially be an idea. I think the Continental Classic is so great. The tournament is so great. It establishes a champion who wrestles under a different set of circumstances than the other wrestlers. You have a Continental match that comes with a promise. There will be no outside interference, and there will be a legitimate winner if the match ends within the allotted time limit. I have never once let anybody come down to ringside. I cannot tell you how many times people have tried to pull crap on me, trying to say, oh, this person could come down. No. And there have been multiple times where I've kicked a valet out of the ringside area myself and said, like, through the announcer, like, get out of here or you're fired.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's the Continental Wrestling to me comes with a promise that these matches are contested under a very special set of rules that are different from anything else in pro wrestling. There's no outside interference, and these are really very sport-like presentation and unique. So I think the Continental title carries a very unique prestige, and absolutely there could be different ways to look at how to give alternate rewards to the Continental champion. And that's something to consider. Absolutely. I think I hear lots of great ideas and I'm always taking them into consideration, but the tournament is one of the best things about AEW, and I like to focus on the positives because it's really.
And I wasn't trying to insinuate negativity with that. It's more just like an understanding of where all this stands in the hierarchy. And you just said something that's so fascinating because I wanted to ask you about it. I'm glad that you brought it up. You're listening to this feedback. You hear what people say. I know you see what fans say, for better or for worse. And one of my favorite parts about your story is that you were the kid who watched ECW firsthand. You were watching the Monday Night Wars every single week, probably both shows whenever you could. And I would have to imagine you saw something that would happen on TV and you said, nah, this stinks. I have a much better idea for how this could be. Did you ever find yourself in that position as a kid where you were criticizing Bischoff's booking or Vince's booking or anything of that nature?
I would question things, but also I was very cognizant that these people earn these positions. I really idolized a lot of these people. And in particular, the different styles that they had. And I respected them, just like you respect different musicians have different styles and they all play music, but they sound different and they have their own different voices. That's how I felt about a lot of these people. Some of them I've never gotten to meet or never had a particularly pleasant conversation with, but I always wanted to be a pro wrestling promoter. And I started writing a show called Dynamite in notebooks, and I've been doing it really for the last 31 years.
Right.
I was 12 years old in 1995.
So go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just about to say, I mean, it carried it with me through different schools, from junior high to high school. Sunday school, confirmation class, college, NFL owners meetings, the combine. Just found myself sketching out shows called Dynamite. And it was long before there was an AEW or any promotion. I just like writing a series of shows that could lead to a big pay-per-view event. And it wasn't necessarily about being unsatisfied with wrestling, because I was very satisfied with wrestling, or trying to say I would do it better. I just know what I would want to see and ideas I'd had. So I always thought I could contribute something to wrestling, and it wasn't necessarily about doing it better than everyone. I guess it was more about doing something different that I thought would be well received.
Yeah. So with that said, then you have to imagine there are a lot of other people who are in those same exact shoes right now. They're watching AEW Dynamite and they're writing their own show that maybe in 20 years will be on the air. Who's to say? Or they're watching the Death Riders angle and they're saying, oh, I think that this would work. And here's why it would work. I think this could be a good idea. Here's why this would work. Or maybe they're online and they're spitting vitriol comments. Who's to say? But do you place value on that feedback that you get from the fans? Like, how much are you truly engaging with that, whether directly or even indirectly with internally?
Yeah, a lot. I put a lot of merit into that feedback. I really like to hear what the fans think in the arenas and at home. And sometimes I'll have people in wrestling, if I mention these things, say, why do you care? Or why do you? Because it's the fans. I do care. And I can't tell you how many times I've had people who work in pro wrestling tell me that I listen to the fans too much or spend too much time thinking about what the fans think. Not the case. You always should be listening to the fans. And there's always good insight from listening to the fans, and you could have many different opinions. If you asked, say, 100 wrestling fans to name their top 20 wrestlers, I bet you would get 99 or 100 different answers.
Definitely.
So if that's the case, and if you polled 10,000 wrestling fans and asked them to name their top 25 wrestlers, I bet you would get maybe 9,998, 9,999, maybe even 10,000 different responses, which is amazing. That's how many great wrestlers there are. That's how many different opinions there are. Yet what's incredible is there is a lot of consensus. There might be a few names that would appear on a lot of those lists. And I think it's really important to listen to the feedback of the fans, because that's what makes wrestling great. It was really cool coming out of the lockdown when we'd been doing shows without fans in the arena. All the feedback I was getting was online. And in 2020, as we started bringing fans back to the shows in a very safe way, and I had people asking, do you think this is a good idea? And I said, yes, I think it's completely safe. And there were people criticizing it, yet I brought the fans back. I was the first person to do that. The NFL, the week 1 of the NFL season in 2020, only two teams in the NFL in 2020, week 1, had fans in the stands, the Jaguars and the Chiefs. And a month before that, we had safely put fans back in the stands in Jacksonville, outdoor shows. And we had a year of shows in Jacksonville with no known COVID transmissions and fans having a great time. We brought live wrestling back to television with AEW with fans in the seats. But there were a few months where there were no fans before I braved this path.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great when they came back to hear their feedback, because a lot of it was kind of what I was expecting. And there were some things that I wasn't sure how they were going to react to, because they'd only seen them on TV and there'd never been actual fans in the seats. So I think the feedback of the fans is hugely important. And that's what's so great about pro wrestling, is the fans making their voice heard can really influence and make very positive contributions in a way that's very different from other sports. I mean, sure, there's sports where you could cheer or boo a particular athlete in their performance, but I think a lot of that would come across in the game itself. The reasons why you're happy with their performance or unhappy with their performance, those are things that often are very evident on the tape. And in wrestling, these things are often far more subjective.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's really
and it's a lot more instantaneous too in wrestling, because then you can take a direction in response to what you hear, what you see from the audience that you're trying to write to or cater to or perform in front of. What's something that you have learned from the fans?
It's a great question. There's a lot of things I've learned from the wrestling fans. A lot of it I learned from being a wrestling fan. So really, everything I know is from sitting in crowds or trading tapes with people or talking to other people about wrestling. If I only had my own opinions, they would have been pent up in here for over 35 years now. And for over 35 years, I would have all these pent up opinions. Everything I've learned from interacting and sharing my opinions with people and hearing what they think and the people they like. The first time I talked to other wrestling fans online was 1995, and it was cool to hear that I wasn't the only one with some of these opinions. And
you and Lou Thez, right?
That was one of the people I talked to in 95 on AOL.
Crazy
one
story.
Lou Thez, Brian Pillman Sr.
How about
DDP,
that?
So a lot of people that were on AOL in the early days, and a lot of people that are wrestling writers and friends of mine now that are fans of wrestling, just talking to them about wrestling when I was 12 years old, formed a lot of opinions for me. From current wrestling fans, I think I learned a lot of things. One thing is who they like and who they don't want to see and who they like. And who they don't want to see doesn't necessarily mean who they boo. But I think I learned all different things from the fans. One of the most interesting things to do is to study TV ratings patterns. And that's fans at home. And that's different sometimes from the reactions of the fans in the arena. You might see somebody that gets a really good reaction in the arena that doesn't always get ratings. And that's something that can be interesting to look at. And the flip side, you can get people that do really well in the ratings, but don't get the biggest reactions in terms of the volume of hearing them in the arena. And that's interesting too. So I think studying the fans, listening to the fans, it's really important.
It is extremely important. And I think it's really important too to be very, like, when you're in a position of writing power and you're determining the creative direction of a product, where again you had a great year this year, but you said something in your Ariel Helwani interview, which was a great interview, by the way, and I thought Ariel did a great job and you did a great job as well, having a really conducive and educational conversation. But you said something that caught my attention immediately. And it was that you said that you've made mistakes, but you've learned from them. And I think a lot of people often don't like to admit when they've made a mistake, especially when they are in a position of power and leading the way on a product, a project, an initiative, whatever it may be. What is a mistake that you have learned from in the pro wrestling world, and how have you gone about setting things on the right path after that?
I didn't like the chaos at the end of the episode in Corpus Christi on December 18th, 2019. And I felt like we could have put a better show together. And I remember that we got there with a lot of people who had good ideas. And I tried to take every idea and use them all. And then it led to the ending of an episode that people in 2019 didn't receive well. And it was probably in a crazy way a blessing that we had the following week off, that we hadn't taped a show for Christmas. There were no shows, and it was the last week where there was no AEW TV. It was actually Christmas of 2019. So from December 18th to January 1st of 2020, there were no shows, and it was a very important period of reflection. And I felt like we came out of it for the better.
It seems like that was a transformative moment for you.
It was a transformative moment for me. It really was. And then I had to look at myself and everything we're doing in 2024. And I felt like it was much better product in so many ways. I think the roster was stronger. And I found myself doing some of the same things again. And I told myself, it's exactly 5 years later. There wasn't a week off, but there were taped shows. And we had taped the Christmas episodes. Christmas Collision was live after the college football playoff the weekend before Christmas. And then we shot on Sunday, the Christmas Night Dynamite on 34th Street. And it was the same thing 5 years later. I was home for Christmas and saying, I know we can do better. We have all the resources here. There should be in 2025, I know we can create a more positive sentiment. And it really went very well for us. I think I guess I don't want to describe it as, I don't want to describe being collaborative as a mistake, but there is such a thing as being too collaborative when you're the decision maker. And I think that, that served us well this year.
Yeah. Well, and that's the
be
reality.
less collaborative for me.
Well, that's the reality of being a leader in any avenue, right? Like, a director of a movie is going to have a lot of people giving them impactful feedback, or they're going to suggest things, and the director's the one who's making that call at the end of the day.
It's like the penultimate episode of Seinfeld. All the writers, other than Larry David, saw that as their finale. So they let everybody put in some jokes in the show, and it has more writer credits than any other episode of Seinfeld. And there are some really funny moments in that episode, but it's probably more disjointed. And I do love when Pennypacker and Varnson and Art Vandelay all meet for the first time. And there's some great, and they're trying to watch a Mets game. There's some good stuff about the episode, but I felt like it was less connected than any episode of that show in years, and probably came from trying to squeeze in contributions from 12 different people.
Yeah.
And then you look at some of the best Seinfelds, and they just have Larry's name, or Gamble and Pross, who work together like almost like one brilliant mind with two people connected together. If you look at all the great stuff Gamble and Pross have done together over the years, there's no perfect way to do it, but I think at some point, again, I don't want to describe ever being collaborative as a bad thing, because the whole thing that makes AEW great is collaboration, but the collaboration should probably at its best be between me and the wrestlers, and working to find the best path, and not having a lot of people in the middle of that.
So then what do those people serve role-wise in that sense?
Very, very good question. There are tons of contributions to a wrestling show within a show that can be found in terms of character work, or once the outline is passed down, implementing that outline. But assembling the outline for the show, I've learned, doesn't necessarily need a lot of people involved.
Yeah. And so it's a matter of giving that foundational infrastructure, and then delegation and the process, and moving from that point, because you do have a lot of very talented minds back there backstage. You have a lot of talented and smart performers back there, and this is where the best wrestle, right? So do you let them go out, and the wrestling's the easy part for a lot of these guys and gals.
Well, it's a very hard thing, but I think I never want to make light of how incredible the quality of the wrestling is in AEW. And there's some great wrestlers that have won SI awards that we haven't even talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. So since this is where the best wrestle, let's talk about some of that. Two in particular. Will Ospreay wins the Best In-Ring Performer of the Year. FTR wins Tag Team of the Year. No doubt both their in-ring contributions a big part of those. Starting with Ospreay. Ospreay wrestles 26 matches in 2025, despite having been out since August, which I think is quite the testament to the workload that he was willing to take on. Editorially, Tony, I feel like Ospreay is one of the most special performers in the industry today, and maybe that we've seen ever, frankly. And admittedly, it feels like with him not there, AEW is missing a pretty big piece of its programming. The year Ospreay had and what he was able to give you guys while being banged up, what can you say about that?
Will Ospreay is amazing. When Will Ospreay came to AEW full time in 2024, it was so huge for us. 2024, there were a lot of really great things about the promotion, and Will Ospreay to me is one of the very best things about AEW since he arrived. He had amazing matches. Some of the biggest successes we had in 2024 were directly related to Will Ospreay. I thought that he had a series of amazing matches. I thought it was a great match he had at Forbidden Door with Swerve Strickland in 2024. I also thought that it was an incredible series of matches he had with MJF for the international title on Dynamite in July of 2024, and then at Wembley Stadium in August. Will Ospreay throughout the year was so huge for us. Then amazing matches with Konosuke Takeshita, and of course with Ricochet and the three-way. 2024 was a lot of awesome things about AEW. I think 2025 as a total year in totality, probably better in some ways, but I also think that 2024 set this up and made it possible, building off what we did in 24 to have this great, some people would call it a comeback in 2025. And I'm very proud of it, but I think Will Ospreay is a huge part of it. And to be honest, I'm very glad Will Ospreay is going to be okay and going to be back. I rode Will Ospreay like a horse. I rode this guy and used him so much. Anytime I could, I would have Will Ospreay as a huge part of the show. I think he's so valuable. And when he was healthy and ready to wrestle, I used him as much as I possibly could. And again, I rode the guy like a mule. He was so huge for me and so huge for AEW. And I'm very, very grateful for him.
Is there a world where you would have considered Will Ospreay maybe winning that Double or Nothing match and being the guy to headline All In and take on Jon Moxley and then have the Hangman and Swerve tag match go down there? Because if you maneuver a couple pieces, that's also a story that probably would have made a lot of sense too.
Well, potentially, but I think everything went perfect and we did everything the right way. I wouldn't change a thing. It was the right choice and everything came out perfect. So I felt really good about what we did. And I'm also looking forward to having Will Ospreay back in AEW, hopefully soon. That was really hard. Like you said, it's hard not having him here. And thankfully, everybody has stepped up so much that we've ended the year on a really, really strong note, even with one of the greatest wrestlers in the world and one of the top stars in AEW being away due to injury. Everybody has stepped up, and we can't wait to have Will back.
I only ask that because I watch Will and I'm like, it's so clear that this is someone who can be the guy anywhere he goes. So it would have made, not to say that what you did was the wrong decision, but I think that's a path that also could have been explored. And that's kind of cool to have two guys in Hangman and Ospreay where those options exist at the same time, because that's not always, it's a good problem to have, if you will.
Well, and I think it's to your point. I thought it added a lot of intrigue around Double or Nothing.
Definitely so.
I did a really good job keeping a secret.
That's a hard thing to do in wrestling these days.
It is. I learned you just don't tell anybody anything. And it went really well, and it certainly created a unique amount of intrigue on top of all the interest in this amazing match with Hangman Page and Will Ospreay. Some of the meetings I had with the two of them really made me feel better about humanity.
Well, there was that report.
So amazing.
And I think it might have been Sean. I think it might have been Sean who reported that, like, neither guy wanted to necessarily
without getting both of them were very supportive of the other one, which I thought was incredible to see two guys that both were making a case for why the other one is so amazing. And it goes to speak for how amazing both of them are as people and wrestlers. And I'm so blessed. I feel very fortunate, and everybody in AEW is really very fortunate to have both Hangman Page and Will Ospreay in AEW. And I think their incredible match in the finals of the Owen Hart Foundation tournament is a major reason why AEW won Promotion of the Year and why Double or Nothing was voted by your panel the best show of the year per Sports Illustrated.
Yeah. It's like Scrub says, it's guy love they had there in the main event between the two of them. So FTR was the other name I mentioned. Now, I felt 2024 was, generally speaking, across all the promotions, a pretty weak year for tag wrestling. I'm not really sure why, but that was the consensus of a lot of individuals I spoke with too. And I felt that 2025 was a much, much better year across pro wrestling for tag team wrestling.
I think 2025 in AEW, the tag team wrestling has stepped up and been even better. I thought there was some great tag team wrestling in 2024. We've seen some new teams step up, and FTR is a constant. FTR was great in 2024, I believe, and I think FTR is great in 2025. They are always up to wrestle. They are such a huge part of the AEW. Dax and Cash as individuals and collectively are so great as a team, but also they are so respected by their peers as wrestlers. Everybody wants to wrestle Dax and Cash. They're known as being one of the greatest tag teams of all time. I think having Dax and Cash at their very best and having the Young Bucks at their very best this year added a lot, but those teams have really been consistently top teams in AEW now for over 5 years with both of them here. This year, I think not only did both of them step up and we saw Young Bucks and the winners of the award and, of course, now the reigning AEW World Tag Team Champions once again, FTR, having these top teams and FTR on a weekly basis here in particular with some great new opponents. AEW has had some individual wrestlers that came together and formed top new teams that really added a lot. Brody King and Bandito, excellent as World Tag Team Champions, great individual wrestlers. They had not been a team until 2025, and I thought they were one of the highlights in the tag team wrestling and great matches they had, in particular with FTR. And you add Jet Speed.
Yeah.
It's the Jet Kevin Knight and Speedball Bailey. Now they are two of the top names in the Continental Classic. The tournament's going to continue through this week. Both of them are in contention to be going to World's End in the semifinals, potentially the finals. It would be amazing if it was a Jet Speed final at World's End. I know that's what both of them really want, is for them to meet again in the finals. I thought their one-on-one match was excellent, and they've both been having great one-on-one matches throughout the tournament, but they're also tremendous as a team. And what's amazing is they're new as a team, and they have so much chemistry. So we've had some new teams step up in AEW, and also some teams that have been fantastic that are getting more experience, like the GOA, the Gates of Agony, who found a mentor with Ricochet. And he's been a great mentor for them in and out of the ring, and they continue to get better and develop. But FTR, they are a constant, and I think they were great last year. I think they're great this year. Every bit as good or better this year, but also I think there's great wrestling around them, and the wrestlers around them have stepped up. And there have been also some interesting rivalries and personal situations that have happened with them. You mentioned FTR. I thought they had a great match at Double or Nothing, which again was voted by you all at Sports Illustrated the show of the year. Awesome match with Nigel McGuinness and Daniel Garcia versus FTR. And McGuinness and Garcia, not known for being a tag team, but they had a great story. A lot of this unfolded on Collision, where Nigel McGuinness is the host. And that was a great match. Now with FTR, they're in with a team they had a rivalry with that really was very explosive in 2023 that has picked up in a new iteration, and that is the Bang Bang Gang versus FTR. One of the best matches ever on Collision, I think, and one of the best matches I think ever on AEW TV, in my opinion, was Bang Bang Gang versus FTR.
Absolutely.
Jay White and Juice Robinson versus FTR in Calgary. That match went nearly an hour. It was awesome. And, of course, also in the Bang Bang Gang, you have the Gunn brothers, Austin and Colton. And Austin and Colton themselves, former tag team champions. Now with the injuries to Colton and Jay White, I felt like Austin, Gunn, and Juice Robinson could be a great team. They've been in the stable together for a long time, but they had never been a tag team. And with Colton going down to injury and Jay White going down to injury, the two of them have banded together as the Bang Bang Gang and done really well. We added a new member to the group in Ace Austin, who's got some experience with the Bullet Club, which was led by Jay White and Juice Robinson. So now it's interesting because the Bang Bang Gang, Juice and Austin, were the last challengers to beat FTR before FTR won the belts.
All right, so you can bring that full circle now.
And it's going to hopefully be a next step in that rivalry. So there's more to come with that, and we'll keep an eye on the AEW TV this week. But expect to see the Bang Bang Gang still pursuing FTR.
So you just mentioned all that depth, though, right? Like that's a lot of depth. And I know you like thinking in terms of sports teams, and the best teams are when you can have Manu Ginobili come off as your sixth man and score at will for you, and you look back to the Monday Night Wars, the Attitude Era, when you had the Hardys, you had the Dudleys, you had Edge and Christian, you had the New Age Outlaws, you had DX, you had all these teams that just gave so much depth to the division that everyone who's a part of it inherently can help elevate the profile of it. It sounds to me, from what your words say here, that depth was significant in helping revitalize a lot of the tag team wrestling in AEW this year. Is that accurate?
I absolutely think that's the case, John. And I think having top stars at the top like FTR is very important. And the Young Bucks came back at AEW Dynasty, and again, they've been involved in some of the best tag matches. And those are two teams that have been constants for us. So I think having those two and then building a great tag team division around these top teams, and with FTR as great world tag team champions now, it's it's been a great year, and it certainly has seen some new teams rise into prominence, as I mentioned, with Brodito and Jet Speed, and some familiar faces at the top as well with the Young Bucks and the champions of FTR.
Yeah, FTR, big time year for them. And again, it's just such a crazy year that we saw in wrestling with so much variety, where FTR, they win the SI awards. You could have made an argument for the Young Bucks. You could have made an argument for Brodito. Hell, the Hardys won the PWI Tag Team of the Year. So there's a lot of different influence on wrestling in 2025 and what people value and what they look for out of the products that they get. And I think that's one of the most important things that we have. And I don't want to take up too much more of your time here. And I wanted...
Not at all. You've really been a very, very pleasant for me.
Likewise.
So, I've enjoyed it a lot. So I think it's great talking about this.
I want to dive just a little more into that and then look at the macro view as we wrap everything up here. This year saw a renaissance of sort for a lot of veteran performers. 2024, you guys had Sting, and Sting did just this amazing run that culminated with a huge retirement send-off and was great. I know that's one of your proudest accomplishments. John Cena just had this great last few months of his run and went out in style, and he's this huge industry landmark that leaves a huge legacy. I just brought up the Hardys, obviously not to have conflict of interest here. Many of you listening to this know I work with Matt, but that's a legacy act that had a bit of a renaissance in 2025 as well. Would you welcome more veterans who maybe don't fit the profile of the in-ring standards of an FTR or a Will Ospreay or whatever it may be, in order to enhance the product or work with equity-wise some of these other talent who could utilize that?
What do you mean by don't meet the in-ring standard of
maybe?
Like
and
Ospreay,
when I say this, I say this respectfully to some other performers out there. Maybe someone like a John Cena who is turning 50 years old. He's retiring because he can't meet the physicality of it anymore. There's other performers out there like that. But
I would like it to be known that you are the one who said.
Oh no, I am not saying.
I never said.
At no point have you said this. This is me saying this editorially. So what I'm saying is, would you welcome in veterans who carry that equity from years and years in the industry, who are on the last stage of their career, to work more independently with some of the young uprising talent here in AEW, as you've done in the past with Darby Allin and Sting and the likes of that?
Well, Sting wrestled at a very high level. Again, I would never say that Sting was not wrestling at the level of the top stars in AEW. Sting wrestled at the highest level, and I think if somebody comes into AEW, you expect them to wrestle at a high level.
So that is the standard.
Wrestling at a high level is the standard. I never brought in wrestlers that I didn't think could meet the expectations of the AEW fans. Sting came in here as one of the greatest wrestlers of all time and was in great shape and said, I want to wrestle and I really want to do this. And I thought that Darby Allin was a perfect partner for them. I really introduced the two of them, and they built a bond that became so strong in and out of the ring. And Darby Allin is somebody that exemplifies the in-ring standards of AEW and goes above and beyond anything I would ever ask. And he brought that same mentality to Sting. We saw Sting taking chances, doing incredible things, and having some of the most it's all personal opinions in wrestling. What's a great match? A lot of it is subjective. A lot like movies. A great movie, it can be subjective. I might think, and I do think The Godfather is one of the greatest movies ever. I have friends that don't love The Godfather, and that's their opinion, and they're entitled to that. With Sting, I think Sting's one of the greatest wrestlers. He was still in great shape, and Darby Allin found great ways to work with Sting as a partner where they would have great matches and great success as a team. So if the situation's right and somebody's a truly great wrestler, then AEW is a great home for them. Not everybody has to wrestle the exact same style. Nobody said Sting needs to go out there and try to beat Will Ospreay. We just wanted him to go out and do the best he could as Sting, and he did more than anyone could have imagined. He went above and beyond what anybody would have thought at the beginning. But I think I'd be remiss if I allowed the belief that I don't think Sting was of the highest standards.
If
I really
that was
think
the insinuation that it came off as me. That was not the insinuation I was attempting to make. So
sure. When you say guys not at the standard of Will Ospreay and FTR, everybody's different. Nobody's saying you have to come in here and be Will Ospreay or FTR and have all the greatest matches 52 weeks a year. But if you can contribute in the ring and wrestle, then we do want you here, and especially with somebody with a huge name. So Sting fit in like a glove here. He's a really hard worker. He loves wrestling. He wanted to be here, and he wanted to be here on a regular basis. Sting was a full-time wrestler in AEW.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important thing to note also.
Yeah, you just brought up the whole movie conversation, like subjectivity when it comes to determining what makes a classic, what makes a great movie. In Tony Khan's mind, what makes a 5-star match?
It's, again, there's no one thing.
In your mind,
just it has to be the right fit and the right people. You know, there's different 5-star movies to me. Like, you know, I love The Godfather, and I love The Big Lebowski. These movies are totally different from each other, and they have different strengths, different casts. They're different sentiments and presentations. They're from different eras. They're both great movies to me, and it's not one thing or two things as a rule of thumb that you can ascribe to that. So I think it is a combination of excitement and intrigue and having fun watching the match, and also the execution of the wrestling.
You agree that The Naked Gun is a 5-star movie? That's the most important thing in my mind.
The original?
The OG.
Yeah. The original Naked Gun, 5-star movie. And I also really liked the reboot.
Me too. I did too.
Really, really great. And Paul Walter Hauser has been a great friend of us in AEW. He's hosted AEW before and wrestled for us in Ring of Honor. Paul is tremendous. Yeah. And I thought he was great in the movie too.
To me, that is a 5-star film. And when Paul Walter Hauser brought it, I was very happy with that. So,
me too.
So I think that you've made very clear a lot of the reason that AEW had a great year. You know, the focus, the quality of the in-ring performers. You had seeded storylines planted out. Looking at the industry at a macro level, TNA this year sinks their new media rights deal with AMC, right? It's a healthy thing for the pro wrestling industry to see more and more of these promotions finding homes. AEW is going to be in a position within the next calendar year where those conversations are going to start heating up about what the future holds. I know you have no idea. I have no idea.
I don't agree with that. Oh, how are we going to be? People could talk about whatever they want. We have 2 years left in our contract.
Oh, no, I understand that.
I know the people I work for. We're not going to be talking contract.
No, this is not a matter of...
It won't come up until 2027, I can assure you.
This is not a matter of me being like, oh, what's AEW going to do? Like, no. What I'm saying is because of the nature of our news cycle and because of the grand news cycle, not just in wrestling, but outside of things, all these conversations amongst the discourse of fans they're going to take place. So what I want to know from you, because I know you're very happy with your partners at WBD and you've had a great relationship with David Zaslav. You've made that very clear. What I want to know for you is what do you anticipate the pro wrestling ecosystem to look like over the next few years and change and evolve into? As someone who's so plugged into the industry, how do you see AEW navigating that path, and what do you look forward to with that process?
Well, AEW's grown and continues to expand, and I think it's important to look at not only the international growth, but also this year we reached a new platform for distribution. And people look at our performance on TBS and TNT. I think we've held great numbers on TBS and TNT in a year where we also have started delivering the show to a new audience and have AEW available to people in millions of new homes where they didn't get AEW in 2024. And our HBO Max launch has been very successful, and we continue to bring in great audiences every Wednesday, like Christmas Eve tomorrow, and on Collision, whether it's Christmas night Thursday episode this week or typically on Saturdays. HBO Max is a great partner for us. TBS and TNT, great partners for us. There's a lot of really interesting things happening in the media space right now. AEW is incredibly well positioned, in part because of the quality of the wrestling and in part because of the avidity and loyalty of the AEW fan base, and in part because of the profile of the ownership, having myself as an NFL owner and being connected with all the top media networks and plugged into the world of sports and television and film and streaming and all these things. It helps us. I've been in the offices of many of the most powerful people in entertainment, talking to them about AEW, building our reputation. Some of the richest and most powerful people in the world in the past year, I've sat in their office talking about AEW and how we can expand with them internationally. And I think that it's really important to know that AEW is something I really love, and I will use all the resources and we'll use everything we can to make sure AEW continues to grow and has great homes. And in this case, no matter how changes have come at Warner Media, becoming Warner Brothers Discovery, as we've gone from being part of AT&T to now a great company with Warner Brothers Discovery, and whatever the future holds, AEW is in a really strong position as a flagship program here, and also with the personal relationships we built outside of the ring.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, when they chime in on these things, they don't necessarily understand the grand nature of this and how many moving pieces there are at the very, very, very high level, and that these decisions within these gigantic media corporations, they take a lot of time. But what I want to know is from you, as someone who's in the weeds of that, and you're very observant to what's going on around you in the industry, where do you see the pro wrestling distribution ecosystem heading, aside from just where you guys end up individually, like how we consume pro wrestling in those next media rights deals? Do you see any changes to that?
I think it's very interesting you ask. I mean, TBS and TNT are very strong channels. It's very interesting that cable just had its first positive quarter since 2017. Cable has actually grown this past quarter, which we have not seen in over 8 years. So it is interesting because as people pronounce what they believe to be the future of cable and channels like TBS and TNT, well, there's growth now, and that's something that people had not projected. And I think TBS and TNT continue to be very strong homes for AEW, and now HBO Max also is a great platform for delivery. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, but all of these are going to be very strong platforms for the remainder of our time on this contract and into our next contract. And I hope that will be here with TBS, TNT, and HBO Max. And there's going to be a lot of great opportunities for AEW. And in wrestling, I think the media landscape, AEW is a huge part of the conversation, and the success of AEW has affected many people. It's created a lot of new jobs in the industry, and it brought wrestling back to TBS, which has held wrestling on the Superstation since 1971, had 30 years of pro wrestling, and then had 2 decades without knee wrestling.
Yeah.
So after 30 years of wrestling on TBS, they went 20 years without knee wrestling, and we have brought wrestling back to TBS and to TNT. And these channels, I think, have as rich a history of pro wrestling as any place in cable. And AEW now is a big part of that. But HBO and HBO Max did not have the history in pro wrestling. And that's something that we have brought and are establishing now on a premium streamer. I think streaming has a huge role in wrestling. The streaming services have grown and grown over the years. And there's a big streaming presence now for pro wrestling. And AEW is, again, a big part of that. As far as the consumption, I mean, it's hard to predict the future, but I think there's obviously a lot of talk around the future of Warner Brothers Discovery, and it's an exciting time for us because we're following it all very closely, and we're a very important part on both sides of the equation.
Is there enough real estate for all of these companies to exist harmoniously on television or with media distribution partners?
I think so, absolutely. There's a lot of great wrestling on TV now, and wrestling's been very successful on TV. It continues to be a top show for several channels. So I know in the case of AEW, absolutely, there's a strong home for us on TBS and TNT, and it'd be interesting to see what happens with the media rights in wrestling going forward.
52 weeks a year content is not something that a lot of people can get. And that's a huge selling point. First run content, nonetheless, and sometimes in your case, 2 episodes a week. So there's a lot of value in that. I try to explain that to a lot of wrestling fans when they get in the weeds of this conversation, because content is nonstop. It's constant production. And that's something that is got to be very difficult to keep up with as you wrap up 2025 and round third and to head home into 2026. As we turn the page into the new year, and we can wrap with this, Tony, what's one thing that you would like to see AEW do differently than it did in 2025 and try to grow and expand beyond?
I think there's new international territories we've never been before. We've never been to France. There's parts of Australia. We've only been to really Brisbane, which is excellent. Yeah, I'm excited to go to Sydney and expand into some new places. When you consider some of the best cities in sports in the world where AEW has never been, but we do have good television, I think that is a place where we can continue to expand and grow. We just had our first ever event in Manchester, and we've been on ITV now for 6 years and had never been to Manchester, one of the top cities in England, and we had one of our best Wednesday crowds ever just last week. So I'm very, very proud of that. And I thought that that's a great example of going to a new city where AEW is popular and establishing ourselves. Now, something we did not do in 2025 that we are going to do in 2026, which is first and foremost to me, is return to London's Wembley Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
We set the world record for the most tickets ever sold for a pro wrestling show at AEW All In London 2023. We had great success going back in 2024. And now, after taking some time off, taking 2025 and not having that show, we had a very successful event in London with Forbidden Door at the O2. Going back to Wembley, I think, is going to be great for us. We had a huge year. I think that demand will be there for AEW All In London Wembley Stadium. So you asked me something we did not do in 2025 that I want to do very successfully in 2026. My number one answer would be go back to Wembley and knock it out of the park again.
I think it's safe to say that 2025 was a year that you're going to take a lot of pride in when you look back on it, aside from even just the Takedown awards here. But
oh, no, seriously, that's a good part of it. I appreciate those awards.
Of course.
I have a lot of pride in what we've done this year, but a big part of it is to look back and to receive those awards from Sports Illustrated, which is a publication I've been reading since I was 6 years old in the school library. I read Sports Illustrated. I tried SI for Kids, and I've been reading at a college level since I was a small kid. So SI for Kids was not for me. So I kept reading the big Sports Illustrated, and that's how I learned about the Dream Team and that the Dream Team was going to go to Barcelona and join up for the first time. And it's where I read so many great things about sports, where I learned a lot about football and basketball and baseball as a kid, but also, reading wrestling magazines. You didn't hear as much about pro wrestling in Sports Illustrated, and especially to get such positive things. So to receive pro wrestling awards from Sports Illustrated, I always dreamed of being a wrestling promoter when I was a kid, but I never could have imagined Sports Illustrated would hand AEW, and I believe deservedly so, the award for best wrestling promotion in the world. To get that from Sports Illustrated, it's unthinkable to me. When I was a kid, in those great days of wrestling, Sports Illustrated didn't really acknowledge wrestling very much. So I'm very proud of that we're being acknowledged as the best wrestling promotion by what I perceive as the best publication that I read since I was a kid and have always believed in. The first time I was in Sports Illustrated for football was in 2012, and they published a story about using analytics and statistics in football, and they did a photo shoot, and they projected a spreadsheet across my face. And that was my first time in Sports Illustrated. It was the LeBron Sportsman of the Year issue in 2012.
Okay.
And that was the first time I was in the magazine, and I was very proud of that, and I still have that photo pinned up. And now to be received positively by Sports Illustrated for pro wrestling, it's amazing to me. But it's also a lot of, to your point, it's a year that we'll all look back on very fondly. I'm really grateful to the people who work in AEW backstage, people whose names don't get mentioned all the time but contribute and are a huge part of the show, and to the whole team, the production staff, and the people who work around the crew, the ring crew, the post-production team, and of course the wrestlers. They bring so much to the show. And there are a lot of wrestlers who received accolades individually from Sports Illustrated, or some collectively, like FTR as a team, or Jon Moxley versus Hangman Page as rivals. But AEW as a promotion received best wrestling promotion in the world. We got the best show for Double or Nothing. So many people contributed to Double or Nothing being voted by the panelists and the journalists at Sports Illustrated as the best wrestling show in 2025. But for AEW to be voted the best wrestling promotion in 2025, so many people contributed to that. That's an award that everybody who's wrestled in AEW this past year, everybody who's appeared, everybody who's worked backstage, every fan who's attended a show, brought a sign, cheered, chanted, watched an AEW show on television, on TBS on Wednesday or on TNT, watching our stuff on HBO Max, ordering a pay-per-view, buying a ticket. Everybody who contributed in any way to AEW in 2025 shares in that award. So you're all a part of that. And if you're a wrestler in AEW and Sports Illustrated did not put your individual name or your team name on a trophy, you are part of this one because you're a part of AEW, all of you. And I'm very proud of that, and that everybody in AEW can share in that award together. And it's very fitting in a year where I think the locker room and the fans and the staff all really banded together to help AEW prove that we're the best wrestle, and demonstrate that we put on the best pay-per-views, the best TV shows, and we love wrestling. I'm very grateful that everybody came together and that we were able to have such a strong year that we would be recognized as the promotion of the year. It was not the case last year, and we all worked really hard, and I think people did a great job, and it was a great effort by everyone. I know people worked really hard in 2024 and wanted to win best wrestling promotion. That would have been a great thing to win in 2024, but we didn't, and we all had to go back to the drawing board and work. In sports, you don't always win. It doesn't mean you didn't try your best, but there are times where you win and everything just came together. And it means that maybe you did something better than you had. It might mean your opponents didn't have as good of a game as they did the previous game, but at the end of the day, you put it together, you did it, and that is all of you in and around AEW. We came together, we did it this year, and we earned that win. And everybody tried their best in 2024, I really believe, but everything just worked out better for us in 2025. And it's a credit to everyone who works in the promotion in AEW and everyone who's a fan of AEW. And I'm very grateful. And I think as we talk about some of the individual award winners, some of the teams and rivalries and big stars in AEW, I'd be remiss not to give that credit to every single person who works in the promotion or is a fan of AEW, because you all deserve credit for AEW being the wrestling promotion of the year as voted by the fans of as voted by the journalists of Sports Illustrated, which I think is a credit to the fans of AEW and the wrestlers in AEW and the staff.
Tony Khan, super grateful for your time here. You gave a ton here before the holidays. That's greatly appreciated. And congratulations to you and your team on a great 2025. And I know a lot of wrestling fans are really excited to see what 2026 brings.
Well, 2025 is not over yet, John. We still got
That's true.
Christmas Eve Dynamite. We've got Christmas Night Collision.
Good point.
These are great shows. The Continental Classic is in full swing. We got big championship stakes. I'm excited about the matches coming up at World's End. And then New Year's Smash, the last Dynamite of the year on New Year's Eve, our first ever New Year's Eve live Dynamite. It's going to be very exciting, and it's amazing that in 6 years of Dynamite, it's something that's never happened, and we're trying for the first time now a live New Year's Eve Dynamite. I think it's going to be an awesome show, and I'm very, very grateful again to you, John, and to the panelists that gave us these awards, that voted AEW the winners of these awards. But I'm also grateful for your time, because we sat here and talked wrestling for a long time, and you had some really insightful questions about wrestling, and I've enjoyed talking to you about it. And hopefully people will enjoy the conversation. And I hope that they would be kind enough to check out the shows this week. Wednesday night, Christmas Eve on TBS. Of course, Thursday night, Christmas night on Collision on TNT. World's End on HBO Max, and all these shows you can stream on HBO Max. Thanks for having me on to talk about it, and hopefully we'll end the year very strongly and positively, and then we'll try to get in contention for those Sports Illustrated awards in 2026 as well.